We really need to think of this in two dimensions to build ecosystems that enable both competition and collaboration or cooperation, both of those dimensions to be sitting at a high level. We need high competition and high collaboration or cooperation, which is what nature has.
Hey everybody, my name is Carsten Terp. I'm the founder of a Danish impact media called Impact Insider, and you're watching the second episode in a series of conversations about money and impact. In this series, I ask all the stupid questions about economics to Graham Boyd, and he comes up with all the brilliant answers. Are you ready for that, Graham?
I am absolutely ready for the questions. Whether the answers will be sufficiently brilliant is for you, the listener, to judge.
Well, I have no doubt in my mind. So, why do we do this? Well, if we're serious about pushing the world in the right direction as investors and entrepreneurs, if we really want to have a positive impact, we need to understand economics. And we need to understand it in a new way, argues Graham Boyd, because mainstream economics is flawed. So, in our first conversation, we introduced you to ergodicity economics. This time, we're going to explore the impact ecosystem. And actually, Graham, you promised to reveal how we can create more impact for the same amount of money that we spent today. So, why don't we just begin with a description of the impact ecosystem as it looks today?
Perfect starting point, Carsten. So let me start with what really is a high-performing ecosystem. And we only have to look at how successful nature is to see a high-performing ecosystem in action. What we have at the moment in the impact ecosystem falls short of what I regard as a high-performing ecosystem, and in particular, an ecosystem as distinct to a system is composed of both the system and the interactions, the flows, the movement, the agency. An example of what I'm talking about, you can think of a river ecosystem. Most people, when they think ecosystem, are actually thinking system. In other words, they look at a river and they think that the river bed is the ecosystem of the river. But there's a huge difference between the ecosystem if there's no water flowing down the riverbed and it's a dry riverbed versus when there is a flow of water that is about halfway up the banks of the riverbed to when there is a complete flood and the actual riverbed is invisible in this kilometers wide expanse of water just flowing over the entire countryside. Those are three very different ecosystems, even though the system is the same in all three cases. And the difference is the flow, the interactions. And so that's the key in what we're saying in terms of what is the practical relevance of what you introduced with and what we covered in the first conversation. This flaw inside economics is looking at an economy as the system without really taking into account all of the interactions and flows fully. Yes, there's a concept of the velocity of money and all of those things. So there is a level of understanding of the flow, but not to the extent needed to get to a true ecosystem. So what that means practically in impact investing, and that will be a segue on how we can get far more impact from the same amount of money. So what I see in impact investing is, and let me say the impact space, because you have the entrepreneurs and the investors. And on the entrepreneurs side, you also have the end beneficiaries of everything that's happening in impact, or all of the stakeholders that are beneficiaries, contributors, suppliers, whatever. So what I see there is, on all sides, a large number of highly committed, very well-intentioned people who are absolutely doing their very best to address some aspect of inequality, some aspect of the harm that the bulk of the economy is causing. And whether it's on the entrepreneur side, they're focused in on the specific problem that they're choosing to look at. And on the investor side, they're focused in on the specific arena, category of problems that they're choosing to look at. So you'll find perhaps impact investors who are focusing in on clean cooking stoves, others who are focusing in on photovoltaic renewable energy, others who may be focusing in on clean water, across the entire spectrum of what needs to be done. On the entrepreneur side, equally on the investor side. Now, all of that is looking at one aspect of the system, one aspect of the riverbed. But if you go to any community, a community is an ecosystem. You have all of the systems, the infrastructure, the schools, etc. But what really makes a community are all of the interactions between people. Somebody might wake up in the morning and their breakfast is coming from the food that has been cooked in the house, produced by the farmers, that enables them to go to work, to do their work, to earn some money, perhaps, or not to go to work if there's no work available, which is the even bigger issue. This is all about the interactions between all of these different elements, all of the stakeholders. Now, what we started to cover in the first conversation, the flaw deep inside economics is that the average of all possible outcomes and what you get if you keep going long enough is the same. And that's simply not true in any ecosystem. In other words, where there are interactions, where there's flows. It's true in a static system if you're only looking at the riverbed. But if you're looking at all of the water flowing down the river, it's not true. And at the heart of what we need to create an ecosystem is a significantly higher level of capital pooling, of resource pooling, of tangible hard cooperation between all of the different players. That enables us to get significantly better outcomes from the same amount of money. And this is where what we're pointing at requires a paradigm shift, in particular on the impact investing side. The entrepreneurs and the other stakeholders are already moving in this direction of how do we collaborate, how do we work together, how do we cooperate. If we have $1 million coming in, what is the most effective way of using those dollars to create impact across all of the needs of the community, not just one specific mandate? And if we can mirror that, where on the impact side, instead of impact investors investing in a specific project in a narrow arena and then looking for results there, impact investors instead invest in the entire ecosystem without any choosing, any direction on which specific pot all of that money should go into within the ecosystem, and then set up the entrepreneurs so the entrepreneurs are truly collaborating for the maximum impact across the entire ecosystem and are pooling capital, certainly on the investment side, and equally importantly, when revenue is being generated, and I'm speaking here heavily about impact investing. So this is intended to generate revenue, be self-sustaining once the initial pump priming has been made by the investors. When the entrepreneurs are doing profit pooling, as nature does, then you really have the power to optimize the entire ecosystem to fix this flaw in economics that I was pointing at. And that enables us to deliver far bigger outcomes for the same amount of money.
You say that this is to a certain extent already happening on the entrepreneur side, but aren't the entrepreneurs also competing against each other because there's a lack of funding?
Yes, absolutely. This is one of the things that I'm seeing. I'm seeing that the entrepreneurs know that they would deliver better results if they were working together for all of the needs of the community's economy. And they really worked on the economy of the community and delivering impact across the whole economy. But they're in a game, they're on tram lines where they're set up to compete with each other for a certain amount of money.
So that's some sort of unhealthy competition.
Yes.
And when it comes to investing in the entire ecosystem, why isn't that happening today, you think?
So that I see a couple of, well, there are actually many reasons for that. And yeah, everybody who's watching this or reading this, yeah, have a look at what are your reasons for doing that, and are those reasons delivering the impact that you want them to be delivering or not? But a couple of thoughts from my side. So first of all, one of the key characteristics of how economics teaches us to think is that cooperation and competition are opposite ends of a single line. And you're either 100% cooperating, 0% competing, or 50-50, or somewhere on that line. If you look at nature, you realize that a natural ecosystem treats those as two separate dimensions. You can have high levels of cooperation in nature and high levels of competition. And it's this complementary pair of simultaneously 70% cooperative and 70% competitive that enables nature to thrive in the face of a fairly hostile planet. 99.9% of all species that have ever lived on the planet are now extinct, and yet life is still thriving. And that's because nature really understands this ecosystem way of working and this two dimensions of cooperation and competition. So that's one of the issues caused by neoclassical economics is this. First of all, it's only on one line. You have to compromise, choose one or the other. And secondly, because economics does not fully account for the interactions, it really focuses on the systems, it neglects the benefits of cooperation. It can't see the benefits of cooperation. And so it idealizes competition. It can't see what evolutionary biologists see in nature, the high levels of both competition and cooperation. And so that again drives both investors and entrepreneurs to fit the tram lines of neoclassical economics. And then there's one more, or let me put in two more aspects. One aspect which is linked to that, but a little bit distinct, is the culture that many of the people who are investing in impact grew up in and are rooted in, which is the Anglo-Saxon Western culture. Whereas if you look at some other cultures, for example, Asian cultures and African cultures, in those cultures, there's a very high recognition of the long-term selfish benefit that comes from cooperation. And I think here, as a story, when I was living in China, working for Procter & Gamble, we had a situation where a senior management team from P&G went to visit one of our suppliers in China to understand the project that they were developing for us. And at some point in the meeting, the CEO of company A said, "Oh, by the way, company B, who's doing this other project of yours, was running into some serious difficulties a month ago that was threatening to completely derail the project for them. But don't worry, we sent our two best engineers to them and they solved the problem. So your other project is back on track." You know, and P&G, American style management thought, but hang on, we've set the two of you up to compete with each other on projects that we get the best pricing, the best value and everything. And here you are collaborating for the benefit of P&G. And P&G has now benefited from your collaboration. How do we deal with this? It doesn't compute in our paradigm. So that's part of it, is this cultural, the cultural norms that we've grown up in.
So just to get one thing clear, are you saying that we should cancel competition, or are you saying that we should have a better balance between competition and collaboration?
If we cancel competition, then we're going to have the problems as big as the problems we're having today, just the mirror image. Only cooperation is going to be a disaster. It's going to lead to all of the iniquities of collusion, corruption, etc., etc. We need competition. We need a healthy level of competition. So it is very much about the balance. And with balance, I want to emphasize again, this is not a single dimension like a seesaw, where if one side goes up, the other side has to go down. We really need to think of this in two dimensions to build ecosystems that enable both competition and collaboration or cooperation, both of those dimensions to be sitting at a high level. We need high competition and high collaboration or cooperation, which is what nature has.
So if you could draw a parallel from nature to impact investing, what kind of a system, what kind of a benefit would we have if we could get this better collaboration, this better balance between collaboration and competition?
Right, perfect question. So first of all, we would have far fewer of the impact initiatives going bankrupt or failing to deliver, using up all of their investment and just not delivering impact. That would drop to a fraction of what it is today. Secondly, we would have far more ability, far more capacity when an unpredicted opportunity to deliver high impact emerges, far more opportunity to grasp that, or far more capacity to grasp that opportunity. So you can think of this as a double-sided hedge, where it gives us far more capacity to hedge against downside risks and far more capacity to seize or hedge for upside opportunities. So that's the first significant practical benefit it gives. From an investor perspective, better capital preservation and better capital deployment to deliver impact. So that's the first thing that it gives. The other way that we can look at this is it also gives us the opportunity to optimize impact in the gaps between categories, between focus areas. So, for example, one of the things that solar panels do is they provide shade. So in areas where the sun may be too intense for certain types of farming, if you have a synergy between photovoltaic panels and farming of heat-sensitive, light-sensitive crops, and you bring that into synergy, and you then bring into synergy the use of the energy generated by the solar panels. So you start to work on the entire ecosystem, both a vertical chain as well as the horizontal complementarities. Then again, the same dollar can deliver $10 worth of impact.
Graham, I think this is what we have time for today, but we have a new conversation coming up in only a couple of weeks. And I'm actually very curious to explore one of your favorite topics, collaboration, and particularly what keeps us from collaborating more. Would you like to have that conversation?
I would love to have that next time. And remind me next time to talk about how a forest works, to bring us back to the theme of the first conversation we had.
I will certainly do that. Graham, thank you for being with me today. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. If you have questions for Graham, just send them to me on carsten@impactinsider.dk. Bye for now.
Excellent. Thank you, Carsten. Bye for now.